Recording for NFL Week 13, and we're recording this one on Wednesday evening, so we get the chance to talk a little bit about the Thursday night football game with Eric, who's been here with us each and every week for the last few years. Already up to Week 13, Eric, and kind of a fun, interesting Thursday night football game where we have Josh Allen and the Bills. Allen's been a little bit banged up, but he's going to be heading to New England to play the Patriots. 3.5 point favorite on the road. We're looking at the lines right now over at Betfred Sportsbook, a great place to play. You can give them a follow on Twitter at Betfred Sports. Over under in this game, 43.5. So the Bills came into the season as your favorite to win the Super Bowl. They're 8-3 overall, 5-5-1 against the spread. Patriots 6-5 straight up, 6-4-1 against the spread. Talk to us a little bit about the Thursday night football game.
I locked in the Patriots plus 4.5. Where it's at now, anything over 3, I like. Dawkins and Doyle are out, so that means that the Bills are actually going to be down to their third string left tackle, and I really don't think that's something that's being talked about enough. Like, missing that left tackle is very big. They also have 3 defensive linemen that, I know Von Miller's not going to be playing. The Greek kid whose name starts with R, who I'm not going to pronounce. And another bottom line is they're out. They're without 3 starting defensive linemen, and Benford and Hyde in the back 4 are banged up and could possibly miss the game too. So they're a lot more banged up than people realize. Allen, that UCL in his arm is definitely an issue. He's struggling to make throws. And I know they are 3 DVOA, but if you just look at who they've played against, anytime they've played a team that is a top 10 rushing attack, they're averaging giving up close to 115 yards on the ground. So I think the Patriots are going to be able to run the ball. I know Stevenson is out, but I still think they're going to be.
It's really weird. They
last
week was really weird. They only had 13 carries. That was very un-Belichick. I mean, they threw the ball well. They moved the ball well through the air, but they didn't run the ball at all. Just 45 yards, just 3.5 yards per carry. It was strange because they actually passed the ball well. It was Mac Jones' best game of the year by far. He had the 3rd best passing grade of any quarterback last week. 3 big-time throws, no turnover-worthy plays, 382 yards. He completed 28 passes on the night, but he's really struggled throughout the 4th quarter this year. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been sacked 6 times. And they have big red zone struggles last week. That's what hurt New England. They were 0 for 3 in the red zone. They've also had weird struggles on special teams. I mean, it was a good spot for Minnesota coming back off getting crushed. It was a really good spot for them. The Patriots allowed a kick return for a touchdown, and later they were flagged for running into the punter on a 4th and 4 that gave the Vikings the ball back and extended the drive. And then they had a punt that only went for 31 yards. That was like a total shank. So a few miscues on special teams, which was very un-Belichick. Like Cousins was able to kind of overcome some of those primetime demons. Yeah, the Bills, they feel like they're going through their kind of lull that they do each year. Allen still doesn't look right. He was pretty good, though, last week, just like on the numbers, 24 of 42, 253 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He had 10 carries for 78 yards. The problem is when they need a play, they really just go to him running the ball.
Yeah,
and that's like,
right? From Dorsey on the offense,
which is kind of a little scary because they've got plenty of weapons offensively, but they did, he was 9th on passing grade in the week, 4 big time throws, 2 turnover worthy plays. He wasn't perfect or anything. Now, they couldn't move the ball against one of the NFL's worst passing defenses really last week, the Lions.
Yeah, but the Lions defense was playing a lot better.
No, they have. But this defense is definitely a step up. Well, what's kind of weird about that is the Patriots defense, they were the number 1 pass defense, but they just couldn't stop Jefferson last week.
Jefferson went off. I mean, they held Cook to 22. But I mean, overall defensively, I mean, they were limiting the Vikings to 5 yards a play. when they were getting about 7.4 yards per play. There was that weird play. I'll be honest, I thought it was a touchdown with Hunter Henry. I was a little shocked that it wasn't a touchdown. And I'll be the first to admit, I was on the Vikings. I thought the Patriots got a wrong end on the whistle on a couple calls. I mean, you got Belichick on short rest. You're looking at it. He has 56% ATS as a dog. Allen laying 3 or more points on the road. He's only 39% ATS, so he's really not covering these small numbers.
Do we have any kind of weather here?
Not that I know.
It's like I saw maybe like 32 degrees, but I don't know if I see any sort of like rain or snow. I mean, if it's just cold, like the Bills can handle cold, obviously. That wouldn't really, right? So that
nothing.
But yeah, I agree. It feels like the Patriots are the spot here. My only concern is that I've felt like through a lot of the year they've been a little bit overvalued just as a team. Like I don't think they're that good, but in this spot with this number and with the number that you got, even a better number than this, that I would not be laying the number with the Bills on the road here. This to me is just kind of a stay away. I would not be shocked to see anything in this one. Thursday Night Football, I'm kind of staying away, but you got a great number earlier. And at over a field goal, I would still lean New England, especially at 3.5, which we're still seeing right now.
Yeah, anything over a field goal, I definitely lock it up.
Okay, let's anything else you want to mention in this game, buddy?
No, that's it. Maybe I'll
Von Miller injury, obviously.
Well, yeah, Von Miller, that's one of the defensive linemen.
Yeah, you mentioned the linemen, but that's going to be a big one for them. I mean, they had a punt on 3 consecutive possessions against the Lions last week. They let the Lions stay right in that game. But then when they needed to score, they went 90 yards, 14 plays to take the lead. Under pressure.
I mean, that's more Dan Campbell not understanding simple time management.
Combo of everything. Like and like I said, wasn't like the offense was humming. It was just a lot of those. Any defense, it's going to be tough to stop those Allen just runs, right? The scramble runs are always really tough to defend. He can pick up 5, 6, 7 yards on those quite a bit when plays break down. And he wasn't good under pressure. He had his 4th red zone interception in his last 5 games. Again, just not quite sharp as we continue along.
I mean, just real quick. I mean,
yeah.
Greg Russo, defensive lineman, out. Von Miller, out. AJ Espinoza, out. Tremaine Edmonds, middle linebacker, out. Benford, IR. Hyde, IR. Elm, the kid from Florida they drafted, IR. On the offensive line, Mitch Morse, starting center, out. Deion Dawkins, out. Tim Doyle, injured reserve. I mean, they're a lot more banged up than people read.
Absolutely.
Even someone like a Jamison Crowder, that underneath guy, that's just going to be so. I mean, if they have Crowder there, that just adds in that. I think he's better than Isaiah McKenzie.
Well, and yet they don't really have a number 2 is what we were talking about, right? They've got like all these other guys trying to fill in and like Gabe Davis, who's really inconsistent. And after Diggs, they need a bunch of those others because they don't really have that strong tier of like wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. It's just wide receiver 1 and then a bunch of other playmakers. They use some of like scat backs and all different guys that they can just try to get the ball in their hands.
Yeah.
Let's get to Browns Texans. We've got the return of Deshaun Watson here. The number in this game, Cleveland Browns are a 7-point favorite on the road playing the Texans, over under 47. So the Browns are 4-7 straight up, 5-6 against the spread. They come off of the win against Tampa last week. Houston 1-9-1 overall, 4-6-1 against the spread. The story obviously will be Deshaun Watson returning to Houston. It's going to be his first game in 700 days. Now, just got to give a little shout out to Brissett. He made a couple bad decisions late in some games that really cost the Browns that they could have won 2 other games possibly and maybe felt a lot better about where they are right now, but he had a pretty decent year overall. He ranked 9th in Pro Football Focus passing grade this year. He was tied with Aaron Rodgers. He's ahead of Herbert, Jackson, and Dak. So shout out to Brissett. And that was over like a nice sample size of 11 games. We're not talking filling in for 2 or 3 games. He's a very good backup quarterback. You can't, like we saw, you cannot lean on him repeatedly, but he's probably still up at the top of the backups this year. And what do we expect from Watson in this game? Like, what can we possibly expect from him after 700 days out? Now, he has been able to practice with the team, which is a little bit different than some of the other similar suspensions, but this Texans team is awful. I'm going to get into some of their metrics, but this has to be a game that they have all circled, and everyone looks at this like their major Super Bowl to get up and really make it difficult for this guy coming back there, right?
It's really hard to think what you're going to get from Watson. You know what I mean? He
may just be completely rusty, out of shape, like not up to game speed.
Part of me just wants to kind of take the Texans first half plus the 4, just because I think he's going to come out like a little rusty. But my worry is this Texans team is they just can't stop the run. You have Nick Chubb, who's having a fantastic season. Are they going to be able to stop Nick Chubb? And then offensively, their best playmaker, Dameon Pierce, he's just been non-existent the last 2 games because they've gotten down and they haven't been able to use him, and they're forcing to pass the ball. And with the lack of talent at the quarterback position, it's just really limiting what they can do. Brandon Cooks has gone on the record saying he wants to play for a winner. He's sick of being there. Yeah, they're just in a bad spot.
And it was weird going to Allen because, like, if you're going to make a move, because obviously they're going to draft a quarterback this year, right? So we all know where they're going to go. Like, Mills is not the guy anymore, but Allen, it would be better to go get a veteran but like Allen, we all have seen Allen. He was worse than Mills. In the first half, he's like one hopping receivers, doesn't look comfortable in the pocket. They had 3 first downs, and one of them came from a penalty. They had 32 total yards on 25 plays for 1.3 yards per play. He threw a couple brutal interceptions. He got sacked 5 times. He had 5 turnover-worthy plays in the game. He was ranked 33 out of 34 quarterbacks last week that took snaps. He got a little better in the second half. He ended up with 14 consecutive completions at one point. I mean, Miami was up by 30, and they relaxed. They took out a bunch of their starters. They didn't even score a point in the second half.
And they almost covered. I mean, goddamn. Yeah. Like, I had the 14, and I'm like,
I know, it was close.
They almost covered. They did go for 2 a couple times when they scored. Fine, whatever. But those big numbers are really tough. You need a lot of stuff to go right. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Miami took some guys out. I just thought this is just such an unknown. It's been 700 days. Could he come out and could he just
have a little bounce in his step, be fired up? Like, sure. And this is a bad team, right? This is a good opponent for him to come back against, because he'll also probably have a little bit of like the emotional high from the return, being in Houston, a place that he's been comfortable. He's going to get crazy boos, but he knows the place. You know, it's so weird. It's a stay away for me. I definitely wouldn't lay the number with the Browns on the road here. I want to take the Texans, but I mean, even they haven't been able to run the ball the last 2 weeks. Pierce,
man behind.
15 carries, 16 yards the last 2 weeks. But the Browns are the only team to allow more fantasy points to running backs than the Texans. These 2 teams are dead last in points allowed to fantasy running backs, which of course means that Watson can come in here and just hand the ball off a bunch to Chubb, and they'll still probably be in fine shape. You know, Chubb had 26 carries last week. Hey, man, did they finally listen to you after all these years?
It's like the light finally turned on with Stefanski.
116 yards. So they're 4-0 this year when Chubb has 20 carries. Really? And shout out to Njoku. He had an awesome catch. Browns came back from that game late against the Bucks. They won in overtime, won the time of possession by almost 9 minutes. Texans, last 5 games, 11 of 59 on third down. Their game last week, they had the second lowest individual game offensive DVOA, the second lowest performance by any team offense this year in any game. Only one was an Indianapolis, a Colts game earlier in the year. Just brutal stuff. Has to be a game that I'm kind of staying away from as we move to Broncos Ravens. Eric, we have the Broncos 3-8 straight up, 3-8 against the spread. Baltimore 7-4 straight up, 4-6-1 against the spread. You have the Broncos who come into this game, coaches screaming and cussing at Russell Wilson. Bunch of guys in the locker room all pissed off at each other. Apparently only a few people showing up for his birthday. Actually, at least it was a few this time, because there's a few more than last time, if we remember some of the stories out there. Man, this team, just to give you an idea, we're just talking about how bad the Texans were last week. The Texans had the second worst offensive game based on DVOA by any team this year. The Broncos were 31st last week. The only team that was worse than them was that Texans team, who was starting Kyle Allen.
It's brutal. I mean,
man, I will give you credit like every week that they look poor, because you called this one big time. And we even, the craziest part about this is they had an easy schedule.
Yeah.
A really easy schedule on paper. That was what scared me off of playing any of their over-unders one way or the other. It's not like I was like, I'm going to jump in on their win totals over, but you were really dead set on them being an under team. And I kept looking at their schedule, and it was funny, like we talked about, if they had just gotten to 18 points in all these games, they'd be a 9-win team.
Yeah, I mean, they're just a train wreck, but at the end of the day, gambling's all about what? Selling high, buying low. This number opened up at 9.5. I took a piece of the Broncos at plus 9.5. Even at this number 8, I'd still take it. The Ravens have had multiple double-digit leads. They had a double-digit lead last game too against the Jaguars. They ended up blowing it. This team leaves with them not having a true wide receiver, a true chain mover. It leaves the back door open for teams to get back inside the number. Yep. Mark Andrews hasn't been right the last couple of games. You can still tell he's coming back from that injury. Staley, their offensive lineman, is out. With how good this Broncos defense is, I think they're going to be able to create some pass rush and get to Lamar Jackson. Also, you look at it, laying 7.5 points or more, Harbaugh is only 45% ATS. Wilson is 64% as a dog. I don't know. This is their season. At the end of the day, these are professional athletes. They know what they're playing for. These guys are playing for their next contract. They're playing for money. Even though you don't like someone, you're just not going to roll over. And we've seen it. When you have these big numbers over a touchdown, you need a lot of stuff to go right.
The total in this game is 38.5.
Yep, really low. And also, we need to remember what happened last week. Last week, every single big favorite covered the number. So
numbers get inflated.
Yep, numbers get
it's not like when people wonder and they go, oh, well, that doesn't mean the favorites are just going to lose the next week. No, but what ends up happening is the favorites are bigger favorites. Yep. Because people that won last week come back and bet the favorites again.
Yep, exactly. I mean, we saw it. What were the Dolphins covered, the Chiefs covered, the Eagles covered, and the 49ers covered. So all the 4 biggest favorites on the board, all freaking covered somehow. So yeah, I like it. I like it over at the touchdown. Like I said, Ravens have been back allowing teams in. There's some double-digit leads. Their offense isn't right. Running game isn't right. Duvernay hasn't really taken that step forward. Andrews is hurt. And I think Staley being out on the offensive line is really going to hurt when you're playing one of the better defenses in the league.
When he's out, the running backs per carry drop from 5.1 yards per carry to 3.65 yards per carry. They go from.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I may have the Michigan State game on in the background. And
good result.
Said Lamar Jackson left practice early due to an undisclosed injury today.
Oh, okay. And he was sick again recently. He's been sick a lot. as of late, and he got kind of into it with a couple of people on social media there. Also, now there's some crazy Ravens numbers here. Okay, check this one out. There have been 4 teams in NFL history that have led by more than one possession in each of their first 11 games. And the Ravens are one. So the Ravens have been up by more than one possession in all of their games. They were up by 9 points again in this game in the fourth quarter. So the other 3 teams that have done that in history, the 42 Bears, they were 11-0 in their 11 games. The 2009 Saints, they were 11-0. The 2011 Packers, they were 11-0. And the Ravens are 7-4. They have lost 4 games this year where they've been leading by multiple scores. They blew a big lead again. They had a 4-game win streak coming into this game, but they fumbled deep in their own territory. That gave Jacksonville an opportunity. Lamar actually played pretty well. Like, his numbers didn't look great at first glance, but like you're saying, they don't have receivers. He had the number 1 passing grade of the week. He had 3 big-time throws. His receivers dropped 5 passes. He didn't have any turnover-worthy plays. He carried the ball 14 times for 89 yards, but they had to kick 3 red zone field goals because you can start to stack the box against them. And then Stanley's out, so they're not running the ball quite as well. They don't get the push. They don't have a healthy Andrews. They don't have receivers. What do? Everybody just knows that it's going to be Lamar trying to run. And, they were playing against Jacksonville. Jacksonville came into the game allowing 60% of red zone touchdowns, and they had to kick field goals 3 times. Shout out to Deshaun Jackson, 62-yard pass. This was the 13th different quarterback who has thrown him a 50-yard pass in his career. 13 quarterbacks have thrown him a pass for 50 yards. That's the most since they started tracking this data back in 1991. The Baltimore Ravens over the last 2 years, Eric, you're hitting on this point, the most losses when leading after 3 quarters. 7 times they've lost games when leading after 3. They've outscored opponents 205 to 119 in the first 3 quarters, but they've been outscored 108 to 70 in the fourth. It looked like Tucker had an opportunity to get the 67-yard field goal in to win it. He was just short. Last week, they ran more plays, averaged more net yards per play, had more total net yards, but they still found a way to squander the game. 4 of 10 on fourth down this year. 8 of those attempts, 1 or 2 yards to gain. So they're 4 of 10. Opponents are 12 of 17 on fourth down against them. Not a lot of great Raven stuff coming out of that game. Again, we were talking about this Broncos team whose offense has just been anemic. 4 for 14 on third down, but this feels like a really good spot. Latavius Murray looked good. They ran the ball well. 13 carries, 92 yards, 7.1 yards per carry. They've only scored 13 second-half points in their last 3 games combined, so maybe they are a perfect match for the Ravens because the Ravens give up so many points in the second half. They fumbled in Panthers territory. They missed a field goal, and then it took them 14 plays to score a touchdown when they were down by 20 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, geez. Not great for the Broncos, but again, I agree with you. This number is too big. I would definitely lean I would lean on the Broncos side in this one. Anything else you want to hit on this one, buddy?
Latavius Murray's the only game in town. I mean, if his touchdown prop is over plus 150, I would look to take that.
Let's move to Packers Bears. Packers a 4.5-point favorite on the road against the Bears. Over under in this game 43.5. Green Bay is 4-8 straight up, 4-8 against the spread. Chicago 3-9 straight up, 4-7-1 against the spread. Rodgers is saying he's going to play in this game.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, he looked pretty banged up with multiple injuries, and then, when Love came in, he was 6 of 9 for a touchdown and 113 yards. Maybe he feels like they still have an outside shot to get in, and he's going to play until they're like mathematically eliminated. I were them, I would want to try to get another look at Love if possible. I mean, this team, this is a tough game to get a feel for because of the Rodgers injury, obviously. They're on the road here. They play a Bears team who, wants to run the ball still, but Fields isn't playing in this game, right? There's going to be Simeon again?
I mean, Fields wants to play, but they haven't made any announcement yet. The way the line is moving, it's insinuating that Fields isn't going to be playing and Rodgers is going to be playing.
I agree. That's what it looks like.
I heard this. There's this thing going around social media that Love is going to finish out the season. He's going to take over next year. The only issue with that is Rodgers' cap hit for next year, if he's not on the team because he's cut or traded, is $99 million. They have a $99 million in dead cap space. You can't field a team when you have $100 million of dead cap space. So he's at least there for one more year. I do think since the money is guaranteed, they do kind of need to roll out Jordan Love and kind of see what he has.
Yeah, I agree.
A couple teams that need a quarterback next year, with them basically just married to Rodgers now with this contract. I think you got to let Love see what he has. And if you could flip him out for another draft pick, I think it's worth doing it, just because you do have I feel like this roster and you need to fill them because you're married to Rodgers for the next couple of years.
I feel like you're gonna sing me a song right there because you were talking about letting Love in and you're being married over there to Rodgers. It's like, are you gonna sing me a ballad right now, man?
No ballad. But with not really knowing what's going on with Fields, it's really tough to say.
I agree.
32 DVOA defending the run. Obviously,
you said the Packers.
The Packers are.
Last week, they gave up 363 yards rushing. That was the most given up by the Packers franchise since 1977. That was the most given up by any team this year, rushing 363 yards. And, I mean, if the Bears are going to be competitive in this game, it's just going to be Montgomery, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He actually was pretty good last week. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry without Fields in a game where they were playing Simeon. You knew they were just going to hand it off to Montgomery over and over. It was his second best game of the year as far as yards per carry, and everyone knew what was coming. Simeon got off to an okay start. They led back-to-back scoring drives. Following that, they got two first downs on their next 5 drives. He finished with 179 yards and a touchdown interception. Mooney got hurt, so that limits their playmakers. But, if the Packers just want to lean on the run, the Bears are miserable against the run. They've ranked 31st in rushing defense over the last couple weeks. Do you have a strong one? I'm staying away from this one with all the moving parts and pieces.
Yeah, there's just a lot going on. It'd be a pass. I'd look for Montgomery. I will say this. In terms of DFS, I really think he's going to be a little under-owned compared to Chubb. So I think he's a must-play in DFS.
Let's move to Jags and Lions. So Jacksonville is a short favorite on the road against your Lions. Jacksonville 4-7 straight up, 4-6-1 against the spread. Lions 4-7 straight up, but 7-4 against the spread. Man, this feels like a fantastic spot for the Lions where the Jags are coming off a game where they played really well. I'm going to go through a lot of really positive Jag stuff. This was probably the best game of Trevor Lawrence's career by far. I thought by far because of the importance of the plays that he made, the pressure on him when he made some of the big plays. It was great. But then everybody's talking about that now. And everybody's talking about how, man, Trevor Lawrence is the guy now. And maybe he comes out and has a fantastic game, but I think Jacksonville's a little bit overvalued here. Keep in mind, this Lions team is playing really well. So they just went toe-to-toe with the Bills. Eric, your Lions this year, they're 5 losses. They have 5 losses out of their 7 by 1 score. They've lost to 3 of the teams with 3 of the best records in the league. I guess 4 when you say Philadelphia, Minnesota, the Bills, and the Dolphins. All 1-score losses to those teams. This Lions team has been competitive against good teams, and now they're a slight home underdog against the Jags team that I think is just getting a little bit too much love coming off last week. We had another big game for Amon-Ra St. Brown. 9 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown on 10 targets. He picked up 7 first downs. Williams, 13th rushing touchdown of the year. He has more rushing touchdowns than 27 teams have this year. He has one less touchdown than the Broncos have of all touchdowns this year. And it's not like he's just scoring on short plays. He's the 6th overall running back in rushing success rate this year. It's not fluky. For the Lions, it's just the mistakes, right? It's fumble in the first half, bad sack in the end zone for a safety, miss a 29-yard field goal, bad roughing the passer call, some bad clock management down the stretch. Then they can't get a couple big stops on third down. It's like you put them all together and it's like, damn, 5 or 6 things. If like 1 or 2 of those happen, they win the game. And that happens like every week with them. The Jags, I mean, they give them all the credit in the world for their win, but we were just talking about how it's become sort of a common thing for Baltimore. So do we take more of it for Jacksonville as a positive that they came back, or more for against Baltimore because they've done that a few times this year? And that was a fantastic spot for the Jags. You were all over that one. I think we were both on that one as one of our 5 last week. We were 4-1 in our 5 games. They had 3 scoring drives in the final 6 minutes of the game. That's very rare. But shout out to Lawrence. He had 4 big-time throws. He led 2 touchdown drives of 75 yards late in the game, plus a 2-point play. He wasn't perfect. He lost a fumble. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays, but he was excellent in those big pressure-filled moments. He showed major signs of being the guy we thought he was supposed to be. Short passing, which is what the best quarterbacks do. They take advantage of all the short stuff right there. 7 of 8, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns on intermediate passes. His first 300-yard passing game. His career-high passer rating. And this guy needs to start stacking wins. He's tied for the worst career record for a number 1 pick after 27 starts. He's 6-21. Another thing that you called, Eric, Etienne, not really being durable for the every down between the tackles running back. He had to leave the game with injury. Now he looks like he'll be okay. They said he's been cleared to return, but Hasty had to come in last week, 12 carries, 28 yards. Hasty also had 5 receptions for 67 yards and a touchdown. In that spot, the Jags had been 0-11 against teams that were 4+ games over 500 in the last 5 years. Anytime they played a really good team, they were 0-11. That's the first time they beat a team that was 4 games or more over 500. And they had been 0-162 since 2000 when trailing by 7 points or more in the final 2 minutes of a game. Good spot for your Lions. What do you think?
I'm just kind of waiting. I mean, the numbers slowly been moving. Lions are up to +1.5. My thought process is you touched on Trevor Lawrence. Sports is 90% mental. Everyone wants to gawk about how like athletic, how big these guys are. Mentally, and we've seen it with Carson Wentz, if you're not there, you're not there. So I think mentally, even if it was more of a Ravens issue than the Jaguars figuring stuff out, I think this is going to help Lawrence's development as a quarterback. But, you know, you're just kind of looking at their defense. They're 26th in total defense, 30th in pass defense, 13th in rush defense. I think the Lions are going to be able to move the ball on this defense. Jameson Williams, the number 1 draft pick out of, the first round draft pick out of Alabama. He is coming back. He is a field stretcher. Him being there and just being able to stretch the field, it is going to open up the underneath stuff more for St. Brown, more for Reynolds, more for DJ Shark. Just the threat of the home run hitter, it's just going to open up so much stuff for this offense. Goff is 10-3 ATS, 77% as a home dog for the Lions, 59% in general. I want this number, if it gets over 2, close to like 2 to 3, I'm in. 1.5, I'm just kind of hanging tight. I'm going to wait. I think the Jags are being a little bit overvalued. I think the Lions should have won that game. If Campbell had a better clock management skills, I really believe they would win that game. They kind of, sometimes I just don't get what he's doing. Stuff times to click a little bit. And he's just kind of an example of a guy like, what the Lions need to do is they just need to hire a clock management guy.
And they do. They do. Because, see, Campbell is just a perfect example of a guy that I think he is a good football coach. I don't think he's a head coach. I think he would be a good, like, maybe lower level coordinator or like a positional coach, and one of those guys that gets everybody pumped up, gets everybody ready. But I think when you have so much to do as like a lead coordinator or your head coach, you end up having to do things that aren't in your strength of some coaches, right? Some of the things as a coach, you're a coach. When you have to be like a manager on top of a coach, that's not as much as like working with the players and getting guys pumped up to go out there and run through a brick wall as it is like you're saying. Now he's dealing with clock management. He's worried about all stuff on offense, on defense, special team stuff, everything that's going on. Is that guy hurt? Oh, wait, we haven't given them the ball a little bit. Let's make sure we keep them happy. There's a lot of stuff to be dealing with.
Yeah, a ton. And Campbell is really good at getting everyone fired up. There's just that little certain stuff he's really, really kind of missing. And this Jags team is young. We mentioned earlier the Lions defense is playing better off the bye. They're moving people around a little bit more. And, you hit on it. Etienne's not the dude. He's banged up. I think he's going to miss more time. He's not a 20 carry guy.
No, he's very talented.
Yeah.
You just need him to be a part of another back that you can hand it to another 15 times between the tackles, and then he can get some passing work. You can give it to him 10 or 12 times there, and then another 5 or 6 touches. Like, that's where he's best.
Oh, 100%. He's like Reggie Bush. That's what he is. He's
perfect.
Reggie Bush.
Perfect comparison.
I like the Lions here. If this gets up to 2, anything higher than 2, I like.
Yeah, right. At this point, because it's not like it threw any key numbers, like I feel like the Lions should be a slight favorite in this game. So I just play like the Lions on the money line here right now, which I think you can get at like minus 105. If you're looking at the Lions like we are, just kind of favorably in this spot. Let's move to the Jets Vikings here, Eric. So we have the Vikings as a 3-point favorite. Over under in this game, 44.5. New York Jets are 7-4 straight up, 7-4 against the spread. Minnesota Vikings 9-2 straight up, 5-1 against the spread. The Vikings in that really nice spot. They bounced back after the embarrassing loss against the Cowboys. They beat the Patriots on Thanksgiving. Monster game for Jefferson. Caught 9 of his 11 targets, 139 yards. He's now passed Randy Moss for the most receiving yards in a player's first 3 years in the NFL. He's got 6 games left to tack on to that record. He's been on the field for 413 out of the 424 pass plays they have run this year. Because it's crazy because, Minnesota in all of their games, they've been close. Except for the Dallas game, right? Because they got blown out. But like all of their other games have been decided by 1 score, and they went on that stretch of all those 1-score wins. So Jefferson's never sitting out. He's always in the game because they always need him in the game. And he's been on the field for all but 9 of their passing attempts this year, which is just crazy. There was one play last week where he didn't catch a pass, but 3 defenders focused on him. So Thielen was wide open. And that's what happens when you start getting that reputation like him. Your guys in the secondary get a little confused. They try to double him, and we both got Jefferson, and then someone else is wide open. They couldn't really run the ball, though, last week at all against New England. 27 carries, 57 yards, 2.1 yards per carry. Shout out to them. They're second in the league in net penalties and penalty yards. They've been very disciplined so far this year. Great game for Cousins, man. He proved it in primetime, too. He completed more than 81% of his passes. That was the second highest mark ever against a Bill Belichick Patriots defense. Second highest completion percentage ever against a Patriots Bill Belichick defense. He was top 3 last week in EPA and in completion percentage above expectation. Kirk Cousins balled out. He was just kind of sick of hearing all the crap. But I don't know. Do you want to trust him again here in this spot? We have a Jets team with Mike White, who showed when you just have a competent quarterback that makes the play in front of him and doesn't try to do too much, this Jets team has a pretty decent roster because they've been bad for so many years. They've had high draft picks. They've got a couple of good playmakers in receivers. They've got some really good defensive pieces and a really strong defense. They are now 4th in defensive DVOA, They are 9th in overall DVOA. This game last week for the Jets was their best offensive DVOA game of the year, and it was the best offensive performance by any team last week. They made simple plays. Couple examples. 3rd and 2, nothing down the field. Mike White dumps it off. Running back beats one guy. All of a sudden, he picks up 16 yards. Instead of trying to force an interception on 3rd and 2, he just dumped it off, let your guy make a play. Now you get a new set of downs and you keep moving the ball. He passed Mike White for 315 yards last week, 22 of 28, 3 touchdowns, just 1 sack. He's the only Jets quarterback to have multiple games with 300-plus passing yards and 3-plus passing touchdowns in the last 30 seasons. He did it last year in Week 8. He got Wilson more involved. 5 catches, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns. Moore came out of nowhere. Couple catches, 64 yards, and a touchdown. It was his first touchdown of the year. He hit 10 different receivers. I mean, Wilson wasn't even completing 10 passes. He's hitting 10 different receivers here. Jets ran the ball for 158 yards. And crazy stat here. I'm not like acting like Mike White is the greatest in the world, but in his 4 career starts, 2 of them, he has 3 touchdown passes. Zach Wilson has never had 3 touchdown passes in 20 starts. Never. The last 2 quarterbacks with multiple 300-yard passing games and 3 touchdowns in their first 4 games. So maybe a better way to rephrase that. Players that have started their first 4 games, and in 2 of them, they went for 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. Mike White and Patrick Mahomes. Only 2 ever.
Wow.
I didn't think a few weeks ago I'd be rattling off a couple minutes of Mike White stuff here on our podcast, but shout out to them. And I think it just shows you how bad of quarterback play they were getting prior to that.
Well, I mean, also kind of like how bad of leadership. You're hearing these stories that came out. Like, I'll use Justin Fields. They had a chance to draft Justin Fields after the Bears lost the game. I forget what game it is. In the locker room, Fields stood up and he looked the defense in the eyes and he said, "Guys, this is on me. Like, you guys played great. I have to be better." And that's leadership.
I love that stuff. I know.
And you have Wilson, who comes off like, you know what I mean? Like, he just doesn't care. It's not his fault. He's passing the buck on everyone else. He's just never a guy that comes off that he's ever taken responsibility. And what kind of cemented that feeling for me is after the game, every single Jets player was talking highly.
They were excited. Those are intangible things that you can't.
Wilson beat the Bills.
I know.
And no one was talking him up at all. White beat the lonely Bears, who were with Trevor Siemian as their quarterback. Everyone hurt, and they're acting like he just won the Super Bowl. That just shows you how much those guys like him compared to Zach Wilson. I will say this, so I rewatched the game. There's a lot of 50-50 balls that the Jets players caught, meaning there should have been a lot more picks that were thrown by White, in my opinion. Do I think the Vikings defense is better than the Bears? Yeah. Do I think it's substantially better than the Bears?
I don't know.
Because on the flip side, the Vikings just gave up 7.4 yards per play to the New England Patriots,
who had been terrible before that.
Yeah, even in general, that's a high number to have.
And Mac Jones had been awful in every other game before that. So was that more the Vikings secondary, or was that the Patriots just all of a sudden figuring it completely out? I think it was a little bit more of the Vikings secondary, like you're pointing out.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. You got and Minnesota's a loud place. You know, that's a tough place to play. Like, how is White going to handle playing on the road? Teams that have won by 21 points or more, that are dogs by three points or more, are 45% ATS. Just a little trend I found. I just don't know what to do in this game. Like,
it feels kind of accurate.
Luckiest game. They're the luckiest team in the NFL.
These 2 teams have benefited from schedule, from some of the teams the quarterbacks they've caught. These have been like, I want to see a couple more games from Mike White, right? And for the Vikings, we knew, like, it's been great because the last 2 weeks we were both beautifully against, and then for the Vikings. It was perfect. And now this week, I just kind of want to stay away because I don't get the type of feel like we got for them the last couple weeks. Like this.
We don't know what's going to happen right now. We just don't. We don't know what's going to happen. There's too many questions. Vikings are due for regression. Jets, we don't know what we're going to get with White. This is just a pure and utter pass for me.
Yep. Couple good teams on paper, though, 9-2 and 7-4, and right in the playoff hunt. Let's move to Steelers and Falcons. So the Steelers are a short favorite here on the road. And one or so, basically like a pick'em game. Over under in this game is 42. Steelers are 4-7 straight up, 5-5-1 against the spread. Falcons are 5-7 straight up, 7-5 against the spread. Falcons ran for 167 yards against a team that only gives up 103 rushing yards per game last week. They had 4 ball carriers with at least a long of 12 yards in a rush last week. Now, Pittsburgh has the short week to deal with after playing on Monday night. That looked like a pretty good spot for them on Monday night. Do you lean the home team in this spot? Talk to us about Steelers-Falcons.
I really don't know what to do here. Probably another pass for me. In games that TJ Watt has played, Steelers are 2 DVOA defending the run. And that's what the Falcons really want to do at the end of the day. They just want to run the ball. They don't want a situation where Marcus Mariota is going to drop back and pass the ball. I had a real issue last game with how that played out. Second down, 50 seconds to play. Washington can't stop the run to save their lives. And you're at the 4. Why are you passing the ball there? Even if that wasn't intercepted, the clock stops. You want to leave Washington as little time as possible. Washington had no timeouts remaining at that time. Why aren't you running the ball on second down? If you want to do a play action pass on third down, fine. I get it, whatever. But second down, I hated that play call that led to the INT. Flip side, I know Pickett's getting him a lot of love. I still just don't trust the guy. I don't like what I'm seeing from him. I just don't know what to do in this game. Sidewise, I'm probably going to be not involved, but there is a player prop, a touchdown prop I'm going to be looking at. Do you know who has the most scrimmage yards in the NFL and has yet to score a touchdown this year?
I don't. Tell me.
Deontay Johnson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would have probably been able to get to that one off a couple guesses, but yeah. So it's just math, right? It's inevitable. It's going to happen. I played this with Pittman the other day. Pittman was like absurd. We talked about that stat last week. He was like towards the top in targets, but then in red zone targets, he was bad. He wasn't scoring, but it was a good matchup for him against a team that gave up, a lot to wide receivers. So yeah, it feels like a nice spot against an Atlanta defense that, what are they, defensively, one of the worst teams overall in the league. I think defensively, they are 30th DVOA and 29th against the pass.
Yeah. It's just, they're 22nd defending wide receiver number ones. That's another thing. They're still kind of banged up. I don't know. I mean, I hate both these teams. I just don't know what to do with. You know what I mean? I have futures tied into both teams. I have Steelers not to make the playoffs. They're under win total. I got that Falcons 25-1. I need the Falcons to win this game, but I just can't trust them after last week. This is just a pass for me.
Let's get to Titans versus Eagles. We have the Eagles are a 5-point favorite in this game. They're at home. Over under 44.5. Tennessee 7-4 straight up, 8-3 against the spread. The Eagles are 10-1 straight up, 6-5 against the spread. Last week, Jalen Hurts ran for more than 100 yards in the first quarter. He led the Eagles to touchdowns on each of the first 2 drives. He had 153 yards passing, 2 touchdown passes, 157 yards rushing. So he became the second player since 1950 with 150 plus rushing yards, 150 plus passing yards, and multiple passing touchdowns. Because normally when you have a running quarterback like that, they're not all that prolific passing the ball. So it just shows you what he's been able to do. He's averaging 54.3 rushing yards per game. and he has a 105.6 passer rating. The only other quarterback in history to average 50 yards rushing and have a 105 plus passer rating, Lamar Jackson in 2019, he was a runaway MVP that year. Jalen Hurts finished with 10 first downs on 16 rushing attempts. Sanders got in the mix too. 21 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. They rushed for an NFL league high this year in any game, 363 yards. It was the most they've run for as a franchise since 1948, so the second most in their franchise history. They had 153 rushing yards over expectation. It's the most by any team in a game since week 17 of 2020 when the Ravens had more than that. Now on the Titans side, some of the things that they don't normally do, they did last week. The things they normally sort of take advantage of that other teams do, they missed a field goal before halftime that would have given them the lead heading into the half. And then Cincinnati kicks a field goal to go up by 7, and it was going to give the Titans a chance to get the ball back and tie the game. And they run into the long snapper. So Cincinnati's points are taken off the board, but now Cincinnati can just kneel down and run the clock out. A couple positives for the Titans. Burks has helped the passing game last 2 weeks. 11 catches combined, 181 yards over the past 2. Now, they've held opponents to 20 or fewer points in 8 straight games. The only problem is they've scored 19 or less in 5 of their last 6 games. And they've struggled against some of the better teams in the AFC. Bengals, Chiefs, Bills, they've all been defeated by this year. Talk to us about this one, Eric. Titans, Eagles.
I like the Titans in at plus 5.5. The strength of the Titans defense is a rushing defense. They're number 1 DVOA defending the run. They're only giving up 84.5 yards per game on the ground. And they have only had 1 player gone over the 100-yard mark. And that was Saquon Barkley all the way back in week 1. And that was like really just one big run that kind of got him over. 2 big runs that got him over that total. I think the Titans D-line will be able to take advantage of the Eagles offensive line. Eagles offense is a little bit more banged up than people realize. Dallas Goedert not being there is hurting the passing attack. Gardner Johnson, their starting safety, actually leads the NFL in interceptions. He went down with a rib injury. They just have injuries that are starting to mount up. They haven't looked as good the last couple of games. And then my boy Vrabel, home dog, 60%, getting more than 3 points on the road. He's 69%. I just feel like 5.5 is just way too many points. And without Jordan Davis there, the Eagles are giving up over 5 yards per carry to opposing running backs. I think they're going to be able to run the ball with Derrick Henry. I think they're going to struggle. I think this game is going to come down to a last-second field goal by Elliott. I think the Eagles win, but I don't think they cover this 5.
This will probably be one of our 5 that we get there. I would be on the Titans side with you. Also lean. I think the same exact thing. I think the Eagles win a close game, but that Vrabel will be able to coach well enough to win on the margins, play a cleaner game than they did last week, and keep it close. So I would lean Tennessee here as we move to Washington versus the Giants. Washington is 7-5 straight up this year, 7-4-1 against the spread. Giants are 7-4 straight up, 8-3 against the spread. Now these two teams play each other. Then they have a bye and then they play each other again.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
And this is going to possibly be the season for these two games, for these two teams, like getting into the playoffs, because they're both in really nice shape right now. If one of the two of these teams can sweep the other in this little 2-game stretch, they would put themselves in fantastic shape. Washington is a slight favorite in this game on the road. -2.5 over under in this game is 40.5. Now the Giants, they have a couple of key players hurt, real banged up with injuries recently. And then last week, Jones, in the last couple weeks, Jones has started to turn the ball over again, which he wasn't doing for a while. He had a really good stretch of games, but it was just bad, misses and a couple bad decisions. He threw behind Barkley on a 4th and 1. He was short on a couple other passes. He was 27th in passing grade last week, and he had a turnover. And he had a turnover and 2 turnover worthy plays, 0 big time throws. And Barkley, maybe a lot of those carries have been starting to weigh on him a little bit. He had 39 yards on 11 carries. So this has been his yards each month. In September, he averaged 105 yards per game and 6 yards per carry. In October, 92 yards per game, not too much of a drop off, 4.2 yards per carry. Definitely a drop off in the yards per carry. Then in November, 71 yards per game, 3.5 yards per carry. Over the last few weeks, the defense is ranked 29th in DVOA. All some of those negative things, though, it does feel like a decent spot for them at home. You have the Commanders who came up with some big plays late in that game. Like you said, I don't know if it was them making plays or maybe Atlanta not calling some of the best plays late in that game when they had a chance to score a game-winning touchdown. But let's give Heinicke a lot of credit. He was 14 of 23, 138 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The interception was a bad one. Came right after a turnover on downs, ended up costing them points. They've won 5 of the 6 games he started. Only game they lost, they were up by 10 in the 4th quarter and blew the lead against the Vikings. Since he took over, they are 2nd in the NFL with 37 carries per game, and they are number 1 in time of possession in NFL. And they've been averaging over 34 minutes and 30 seconds of time of possession when Heinicke has been the quarterback. They've won time of possession in all 6 of his starts. That's the longest active streak in the NFL. Shout out to Robinson. He hadn't been looking quite as good, but he had a career high in rushing yards last week, 105 on 18 carries. He tied or broke his career high in rushing yards, receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns, all before the start of the 4th quarter. As a team, they ran for 176 yards on 37 carries. 11 of their 21 first downs came on the ground. Talk to us about Washington and the Giants.
I feel that the Giants are going to be able to run the ball on the Commanders. Commanders gave up 176 yards to the Falcons last week. I think this is a bounce back game for Barkley. I think they're going to be able to get it going. I know the Giants do have some injuries to the offensive line. Chase Young could be coming back, but Chase Young, he's not that good at stopping the run. He is actually more of a, obviously more of a pass rusher. So that's really not going to solve the Commanders' issue. It's Heinicke laying points on the road. You know what I mean? Like, I know they're on a tear. I just feel that they're a little bit overvalued. Yep. I think the Giants, I think this is kind of like a quote unquote must win for them with how they're trending in the wrong direction. A couple of weeks ago, I gave out that price plus 300 for them not to make the playoffs. That's looking pretty good after back-to-back losses. They're right in that game with the Cowboys last week on Thanksgiving Day. I really didn't like that 4th and 1 call. That call kind of cost them the game in my eyes. They did cover the number, which was fine though, because we did have them at I think we had them at 9 or 9.5. I just think it's a good matchup for the Giants. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. I don't trust Taylor Heinicke laying points on the road in a divisional game. I'm going to take the Giants here. I locked in at 2.5.
Let's get to Dolphins 49ers. Dolphins are 8-3 straight up, 6-5 against the spread. 49ers 7-4 straight up, 6-5 against the spread. 49ers are a 4-point favorite in this game. 46.5 is the total. 49ers, coming off a game last week where the defense didn't allow more than 1 first down on any drive in the first half. They only gave up 260 total yards. They've given up 0 points in the second half of their last 4 games. In fact, they have not allowed a point in their last 6 quarters. Now, they did make a couple big plays last week, but you and I were on that Saints side, and what was frustrating is, you get a forced fumble at the goal line, okay? Sack on 4th and goal to end the final drive. Like, those are things that, sure, they made the play, but those are hard to count on. And
the pick that was returned, that was
right
because of illegal contact, the missed field goal.
They only scored 13 points One of those plays not being made changes the entire game and has the Saints covering. The offense only gained 317 total yards, and they scored 13 points, just 3 in the second half. Mitchell had a knee injury. McCaffrey's dealing with knee irritation. It forced them to throw 28 passes in the first half. And on one of their touchdown catches, Jennings, it only had a 31% completion probability. That was the most improbable reception he's ever had in his career, which means great catch, kind of unlikely in a game where there wasn't much scoring. Now, the problem I have with this game is these are two of my least favorite teams, just because I feel like they're both overvalued by the general public. These are two teams that I really would like to play against moving forward and maybe come playoff time. Because you look at the Dolphins, okay, they've scored on 5 of their 6 first half possessions last week. They had some struggles in the red zone. They got up 30-0 at halftime, didn't score another point. Tua had 299 yards passing and a touchdown before being taken out of the game in the third quarter. But the left tackle Armstead got hurt. Once he got hurt, they sacked the Texans did, 4 times in the next 9 plays without their left tackle. And so they took Tua out of the game with like 3 minutes and 18 seconds left in the third quarter. They were up big. And they ended up surrendering 5 pressures on 20 snaps, and they were beaten by the defender another 3 times. So here's Tua's return since he had the concussion issues. They've had 5 games. They played, here's who they have played. The Pittsburgh Steelers, which is the number 14th ranked defensive DVOA. In that game, the Dolphins scored 16.
Steelers with no Watt, too.
16 points against no Watt. Following that, they've played the number 24 defense, your Lions, the number 31 defense, the Bears, the number 29 defense, the Browns, and the number 27 defense, the Texans. That's 4 of the 6 worst defenses in the league. Now, here's the schedule ahead, possibly without Armstead in these games. They play 49ers, who are the number 5 ranked defense, Chargers, who are 22, Buffalo, number 3, Packers are 21, Patriots, number 1, and the Jets, number 4. They have 6 games left, and in 4 of those games, they play the number 1, 3, 4, and 5 defenses. So we're going to find out now how good this offense really is when they have to step up and play a top caliber defense, because they haven't done it in a couple months. We haven't seen it happen. And the thing about the Dolphins too, in these close games against good teams, they have a bad special teams. They're 31st in special teams DVOA. That can always come into play. They rank 3rd in the NFL in yards per play, but 1st in yards per passing play. But the defense ranks 18th in yards allowed per play, 23rd in raw third down conversion rate, and 29th in opponent red zone touchdown rate. The defense isn't very good, and this is going to be a very important stretch of games for them coming up. I kind of feel the same. I talked about the 49ers last week, and you look at who they've defeated and who they beat up on. They beat up on inferior opponents. This should be a pretty big step up in class, like for the 49ers defense facing this offense, for their defense facing the offense. It should kind of be a fun matchup for two teams that I think are a little overvalued, Eric.
So based on what you just said about the Dolphins, I'm looking at it right now. And the Giants plus 300 to not make the playoffs is now a minus 130. The Dolphins are at plus 475.
Jeez, man.
To not make the playoffs.
Because that's a tough division too, with a couple other teams that are really competitive right there too. Like, I mean, I went through that schedule, and you and I have been a little cool on them a lot of the year because they've been beating up on some inferior opponents. So it's prove it time for them now.
Yep. This is my thought process though. I understand Armstead's out. but I started looking at the 49ers and their defense. Their weakness of their defense is what? The back four.
Secondary. Yep.
And I know they are 10th DVOA in pass defense, but these are the teams they have played. Saints, 24th DVOA. The DVOA numbers I'm reading are what they're rating in pass offense. Saints, 24th. Cardinals, 29th. Chargers, 21st. Rams, 25th. Chiefs, 1st.
And they got beat up.
13th. Lost the game to the Falcons. Panthers, 30th. Rams, 25th. Broncos, 27th. Their Seahawks, they're 4th right now, but this was week 2.
Before the Seahawks got comfortable, and then the Bears in week 1 in that monsoon game.
Yep. So anytime they've played a team, so basically only 2 teams in the top 13, we'll say, because let's not talk the Seahawks. They lost both games. Mahomes threw for 417. Who's going to be the guys that are able to athletically keep up with Waddle and Hill in that secondary? I got the number at 4.
You know what's funny? I very rarely do this. I'm playing the over in this game.
Yeah, I think the over too.
I think both teams will be able to move the ball against, like you're saying, San Francisco. Miami should still be able to get their playmakers involved. I think San Francisco should be able to move the ball fine against the Miami defense that I don't think very much of. And this has got to be a Debo game because he has not been involved at all lately, and I think he's kind of getting squeaky wheel right now.
Yeah, I think he's definitely getting a little squeaky wheelie. Then looking at it, Shanahan 36% ATS is a home favorite, laying more than a field goal. He's 37%. One of the guys that followed me DM'd me. He wanted to know what Shanahan is with Jimmy G as his quarterback. Shanahan with Jimmy G as his quarterback is 44% as a favorite, 35% as a home favorite. So he's still not covering the number with Jimmy G as his quarterback. And Tua, can you guess what Tua's percentage is? ATS is a dog.
No.
69%. That's pretty good. For as much as I don't like Tua,
that's numbers.
As a dog. Jimmy G got a little bit banged up at the end. And, we talked about it before. That 13-0 win really wasn't a 13-0 win. They missed field goal, 2 trips inside of the 6, a pick that was called back because of illegal touching. And just with the way Jimmy G plays, and don't get me wrong, like what he's done is phenomenal. It's very hard to trust him laying the numbers because you're always going to get that mistake where you're like, what the F are you doing? I think this is a field goal game, and I'm getting over a field goal with the Dolphins. I'm going to take the Dolphins.
Let's take a look at the Seahawks and the Rams. Eric, we've got the Seahawks as a 7.5-point favorite on the road here, over under 41. The Rams, they're a 7.5-point dog at home. But I mean, what do we even know about this game for the Rams? They're 3-8 now, 3-7-1 against the spread. Seattle, this is a big game for them. They're 6-5 now, 6-5 against the spread and straight up. They kind of laid an egg in a game last week where they just could not stop Jacobs. But the Rams, what's so hard about playing this game, they are going to be without likely Stafford, Kupp, Robinson, and Aaron Donald. It looks like possibly. No, like he may miss like one of the first games. I think he doesn't miss like any games ever. Ah, man, this is just a bummer year for the Rams. They had Perkins playing quarterback last week. They got their Super Bowl win last year. It's just there's not much going right for them this year. Quarterback and done. Top 2 wide receivers done. Donald ankle injury. 29 ranked scoring offense. At the end of the first half, Perkins last week had 38 yards rushing and 16 yards passing. He did finish with 100 yards passing, but no receiver had more than 3 catches. And the defense, that's been the thing that's disappointed me the most this year with them. Sure, they've had 11 different games and 11 different starting offensive lines. Nobody's going to be that good when that happens, right? Even if their offensive line was just bad players and they were starting, they would have been better. But you have 11 different combinations, you're screwed. But the defense for them, they were only able to pressure the quarterback last week 19% of the time. They averaged 20.7% this year quarterback pressure rate percentage, that's the lowest in the league. This is the first time in the next gen stats era where they've had under 26% quarterback pressure rate because of Donald and the strong defense. Now, Seattle, their defense was starting to play a lot better before last week. They had allowed no more than 23 points since week 6. They had allowed no more than 329 total yards in their prior 5 games. Last week, they gave up 576 yards of total offense to the Raiders. That was 169 more yards than the Raiders had gained in any game this year. And it was only the fourth time in Super Bowl era a team went 275 yards passing and 275 yards rushing. The Seahawks gave up 27 first downs. And what's really hurt them this year, they've allowed touchdowns following 9 of their 15 turnovers. Like, you turn it over, just like touchdown immediately against Seattle. There was a big play in that game where Metcalf looked like he had a catch at midfield late in the game. They would have kept a drive going. Instead, the call was overturned, gave the Raiders the ball back. And they're really struggling running the ball right now. Walker had 26 yards on 14 carries. Last 2 games, 24 carries for 43 yards combined. And their offensive line allowed a season-high 4 sacks across 45 pass blocking snaps. I mean, this is a big number for a Seattle team that's trending the wrong way. But, I mean, I'm a Rams fan. I don't know if I can even get behind the Rams here. Can you, Eric?
I did it. I pulled the trigger. Give me the
Perkins
7.5. Here's the thing that people need to remember. Everyone's like, tank for a good draft pick. Well, who has the draft pick? The Lions have this draft pick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think they're trying to lose.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you won't be a scenario where they're not going to like pull players that can play. They're going to try to be competitive. And the Seattle, they can't stop the run. I think McVay is going to be able to put together a run scheme using Williams, using Akers, using Perkins' feet, and just take advantage of the Seattle defense against the run. You look when Seattle's faced a defense an offense that's in the top 10 rushing the ball, they're averaging giving up 202 yards per game. Williams led the team with 11 carries, second in targets. I think this is a big DFS day for him. And at the end of the day, you have Geno Smith laying 7.5 points on the road. You know what I mean? I don't care that Stafford's out, Allen Robinson's out, Kupp's out, and Aaron Donald's out. That's just a big number that a career backup quarterback is laying on the road when you just say it out loud. I think the Rams are going to be able to run the ball. I think they're going to be able to keep this within 7 just because Seattle's defense just struggles so much running the ball.
Yeah, I mean, they have to.
Defending
the ball. They really don't have anything else that they can do there with the Rammies. So Eric's on the Rams side there as we move along to Chiefs and the Bengals. Big rematch from last year as the Bengals are going through some of their playoff opponents from last year in the AFC playoff race. And you have a Kansas City team that's 9-2 straight up, 3-7-1 against the spread. The Bengals 7-4 straight up, 8-3 against the spread. Chiefs are a short favorite here, 2 points on the road. Over under in this game, 52.5. The Bengals have been playing very well as of late. They won without Chase and Mixon last week. Chase should be back this week. Higgins caught 7 passes for 114 yards and a big touchdown in the fourth quarter. A lot of his catches were difficult. He caught a couple tight window targets, and he stepped up big with Chase out over the last few weeks. What I loved about the Bengals in the AFC playoffs last year against the Titans, they were pressured on 32% of their dropbacks. This year against the Titans last week, they were pressured on 18% of their dropbacks. And they held Henry to just 2.2 yards per carry. They forced Tennessee to throw the ball 34 times. They are the only team to play your guy, Vrabel, and the Titans 3 or more times and remain undefeated against them. The only team. They have a 3-game winning streak. They've climbed all the way up to number 7 in overall DVOA. They rank 4th in the league in third down conversion rate. They are tied for 2nd in red zone touchdown percentage, and they rank 3rd in time of possession at over 32 minutes a game. This team is kind of deceivingly better than I think people realize.
Credit for.
By a lot of metrics, right? They're like top 12 in defensive DVOA. And now they're going to be a slight home dog here playing a Chiefs team who, I mean, the Chiefs they played the Rams last week. They just went through the motions. They didn't have to give a whole lot away with this big game on deck, and knowing the Rams had like no playmakers there. What was disappointing for the Chiefs, though, they really struggled in the red zone. Coming into the game, they had the third highest touchdown percentage in the red zone at over 72. Last week, they kicked 4 red zone field goals. They had 4 field goals, none that were longer than 32 yards. They moved the ball well. They had 5 drives of 66 plus yards. They just couldn't punch it in. Defense forced a couple of fourth quarter interceptions. They pressured the quarterback Perkins on more than 30% of his dropbacks. Their young players are really starting to contribute, though, all over the place. McDuffie on defense had a couple pass deflections. Karlaftis, who you pointed out was someone when they drafted him, they were going to need to produce. He had a big sack. And then on offense, Moore had 5 receptions. Pacheco had 22 carries for 69 yards. He got the ball on 10 of their last 11 plays to run out the clock. This offense has scored 30 or more points 5 times this year and 41 or more 3 times. They're number 1 in EPA per play. They're way ahead of the rest of the league. The gap between them and the number 2 team, which is the Bills, is larger than the gap between the number 2 team and the number 13 team. And Mahomes is averaging 8.1 yards per pass attempt, nearly a full yard more than what he had last year. 29 touchdown passes. He's on pace for just short of 50, which was his career high. Talk to us about this game, Eric. Chiefs, Bengals.
Well, with Reader back, this defense for the Bengals is even more unstoppable, especially defending the run. I think him coming back is huge. The weakness of the Chiefs defense is the covering physical big wide receivers. Jamar Chase is coming back. That means it'll be Chase and Higgins, 2 big physical wide receivers. I think those DBs for the Chiefs are going to really struggle defending those guys. But I want 3. If this gets, that's my buying point. Anything less than 3, I'm not going to do. I think the Bengals are peaking at the right time. Joe Burrow is just this dude. They're supposed to get Mixon back. Offensive
He's a stud, man. He's good. He's made adjustments. And again, I don't know if Zach Taylor is a great coach yet, but I will give him credit when he does things well, just like I will critique him when he makes bad decisions. They've made some good adjustments this year. And they've got a little bit better line, and they're getting the ball out of his hand quicker. They're just like, they were running the ball a little bit more. They schemed pretty well when Chase was out. They did a lot of positive things over the last 2 months or so.
Yep. And it's looking better. The product on the field is looking better. And I bought the Bengals at 11-1 to come out of the AFC. I think that's just too big.
I was just going to say, I would look again. Yeah. I played them last year. I would do it again. We know that they could do it in big games against some of the top teams, and they beat the Chiefs 2 times in a row. The last 2 times last year in the playoffs and before.
You want to get these teams you want to get them at big numbers.
Before. You want to get them before. We've seen what has been happening with the Ravens too. The Ravens spit games out. Like the Bengals feel like last week, they didn't have Chase. They didn't have Mixon. They didn't do a whole lot of great things, but they kind of won like a muck it up game that the Titans normally would have won. That was a game that really impressed me for them because we were on the other side. And I still think the Titans would have had chances there, but the Bengals, they're growing. They're learning now as a team how to win. It kind of feels like.
Yep, they're piecing it together. Reader's back. Defenses looks great. Chiefs struggle defending big, tall wide receivers. Mahomes is an insane 78% ATS is a small favorite. But at this number 2, I just don't want to get involved. I want a 3. If this gets to 3, I'll be in on the Bengals. If not, this is just a pure stay away. Interesting game for fantasy football for DFS. I think this is going to be the most, obviously the most populated game. I think you kind of have to look at like a Joe Mixon who's just coming back for injury. Maybe play him. Maybe play Sky Moore. You got to kind of think of what the player is. Tyler Boyd. that's going to produce, that's getting overlooked, because a lot of people are going to have Burrow, a lot of people are going to have Mahomes, a lot of people Kelsey, a lot of people Chase.
Last 3 games on the week 13 slate coming up. We have a Chargers and the Raiders. Chargers as a short favorite on the road here. It looks like 1.5 or so right now, over under 50.5. So the Chargers are 6-5 straight up, 7-4 against the spread. The Raiders 4-7 straight up, 5-6 against the spread. Herbert last week had 274 of the team passing yards of the team's 311 total yards. He completed 6 of 7 while on the run for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns, a game-winning drive and a 2-point conversion to steal the game. On the Raiders side, it was all about Jacobs. He had an incredible game. He finished with 229 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 33 carries, which was the second most carries in a game this year. He had 6 catches on 7 targets, 74 yards, despite leaving the game with a calf injury in the second half. He also had a game-winning touchdown, 86-yard touchdown run in overtime. He is the only player since at least 1950 with 225-plus rushing yards and 70-plus receiving yards in a single game. He's already surpassed his career high for rushing yards in a season. He has 1,159 rushing yards, and he has 6 games left. He has 100 more yards than Derrick Henry, who's second this year. He has more yards per rush than Nick Chubb. And since week 4, he has run 174 times for 967 yards, 9 touchdowns. He also has 33 catches for 266 yards. He has been incredible. Honestly, I didn't think this guy had this level of play in him at all. This is like a totally different level than I ever thought that he was. I thought he was a solid back, but never like this.
You know the saying, money makes the world go round. He's playing for that contract. They wouldn't pay him the money. Now you have a 24-year-old playing for, generation setting money. So this is what he's doing. I think the Raiders messed up by not giving him that contract. Because he is just so explosive with everything he does. He's banged up right now. He didn't practice today. We're recording this on a Wednesday.
And like we saw with Barkley, right? Like you go 33 carries, you're getting a lot of touches. It's going to start to wear on you at some point.
But Jacobs is 24.
And he's doing it, like you said, he's got the motivation right now too.
Yeah, he's 24, doesn't have the serious injuries. He's playing motivated. We've seen it with these guys where there's those, and I'm not saying Jacobs is like this, but you get a little banged up, you get that contract. You're like, oh, I'm good, but you need that contract. And now you can go in and play. I don't know if the Chargers are going to be able to stop the run. That's obviously been the big issue this year. Carr, 55% ATS. McDaniels, awful coach. Half the time I don't know what he's doing. Carr's definitely regressed this year. Last year he did a great job of processing the field, changing the play. It's kind of like McDaniels is just like, hey, this is what we're gonna run. Don't change it. It's hard to trust either one of these teams, but I have this thing that's gonna blow your mind. Do you know what Herbert is ATS against the spread in the second half? Not the game, not the first half, the second half spread.
Can't be good.
12, 29, and 2 for his
my gosh.
3-8 this year. What I'm going to do
is wait, play it live.
Wait. Halftime, I'll look to play the Raiders just because I think that's a coaching issue and a defensive issue. I think Staley's going to be out at the end of this year. Even if they make the playoffs, I think Staley's going to be out.
Because it's probably Peyton, right? If he wants to come in, you got to go Peyton.
I think Peyton's going to be there. I think with how much talent this Chargers team has, it's really hard to trust them. This is the team you want to take when they get points, fade when they're giving points. But this number of 1.5,
it's really not big enough. That's the problem. If it was 3, I'd get to the Raiders. I agree with you. I just don't think there's enough value one way or the other because it feels like it probably should be close to 3 with the Chargers as like a slightly better team.
Yep. I'm just going to sit this one out and I'll look to play Herbert. I'll look to fade my boy Herbert in the second half.
Let's get to Sunday Night Football. We have Colts and the Cowboys. Cowboys as a heavy favorite, 11-point favorite against the Colts. Over under in this game, 43.5. You have the Colts 4-7-1 straight up, 5-7 against the spread. The Cowboys 8-3 straight up, 7-4 against the spread. Cowboys had a slow start on Thanksgiving. They've just been bad on Thanksgiving, honestly, for a while now. But they did have 3 consecutive touchdown drives in the second half to put away the Giants. They had 2 first-half interceptions that allowed the Giants to take a 4-point lead. Weird for Dak. This year, in the kind of the opposite of what you were just saying with Justin Herbert, right? In like how bad or like bad covering in the second half. Dak this year, in the first half of games, 5 touchdowns, 6 interceptions in the first half. And then in the second half of game, and he has 2 sacks and a 6.5 yards per attempt. In the second half of games, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, 72% completion rate, 9.5 yards per attempt. He's been way better in the second half of games. Now, I know Herbert's numbers weren't like stat personal numbers. They were more of covering numbers, but just kind of similar what you were going for there. Cowboys had 13 penalties for 86 yards last week. We keep hearing all these rumors about Odell. We saw CeeDee Lamb maybe trying to make some Odell-like catches last week. Shout out to Parsons, who's been awesome. He had 2 sacks for the 6th time this year. He became the 3rd player to have 12-plus sacks in each of his first 2 seasons. He's also tied with the most games with at least 2 sacks in a player's first 2 years. He has 9 of them. He has 4 quarterback pressures in that game also. Dak has won 10 straight against the Giants. And Zeke had a season-high 91 rushing yards despite facing a stacked box with 8-plus defenders on half of his 16 carries. He gained 12 rushing yards over expected, which is his 2nd most in a game this year. On the Colts side, the splits of Matt Ryan when he's pressured versus a clean pocket are insane. Like clean pocket, he's like top 3rd. Like 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 78% completion rate, 7.4 yards per attempt. He has like I think it was the completion rate was like the highest in the NFL at that point. And when he's pressured, 49% completion rate, 29 sacks. I mean, that's just a key playing against this team. And that's what worries me about this matchup and playing it, because I could just see Dallas teeing off. This is a massive number. I'm not laying it with the Cowboys at all. Is the number big enough for you to jump in on the Colts?
I mean, the Cowboys are a public team playing a Sunday night game. I'm kind of shocked how this number's raised up a little bit, how it's up to 11. I'm just going to sit back. Anything over 10 before snap, I'll probably bet the Colts.
But it might just keep going up.
Yeah, it very could well just going up. I know everyone talks about Saturday coming back and the running game. I looked at the DVOA stuff, said Saturday has come back. The defense is all the way up to 12th and 8 DVOA. So the defense has actually improved more than the offense has since Saturday has took over being the coach, excuse me. Cowboys do struggle defending the run. I think Taylor is going to be able to run all over him. I think this number is a little bit inflated just because we saw the Colts lose on Monday Night Football in a primetime game. I'll play the Colts here.
Yeah, I'm fine with the Colts at 10 also. I mean, this is just backdoor.
But I'm just staying away because like we could see this get up to 14, and just think about all the stuff that has to go right for these teams to cover the big numbers. Like we talked about in the 49ers game, the interception that was turned back, 2 trips inside the 6, not scoring, a missed field goal. The Dolphins game, going for 2 when you didn't need to go for 2 from the Texans, the late field goal by the Chiefs. A lot of stuff needs to go right for you to cover these big numbers in the NFL.
Yep.
So I'll take a double-digit dog.
Almost all the time. Yeah, I was going to say most of the time. Yeah. I'm in that direction also. And it's not as if the Colts have been just completely anemic recently either. Like they've been okay. This is just like you said, Dallas is a tad overvalued here. Like this was like a 9.5. I'd probably stay away, but at over 10, yep, that's a buy-in point for me. Let's get to Monday Night Football, Eric. We've got the Saints and we've got the Bucks on Monday Night Football. We have the Bucks as a 3.5-point favorite and the over-under 40.5. These two teams are awful, but they're both still alive for the playoffs because the Bucks are 5-6 and they lead the division. 3-7-1 against the spread. New Orleans 4-8, 4-8 against the spread. Lots of injuries for Tampa starting to add up. Winfield Jr., head injury, did come back into the game. Mike Edwards and Carlton Davis last week, they had to leave and come back. The secondary super banged up. Wirfs injury, that could really impact the offensive line. This is an offensive line that was only able to score 17 points against the 22nd ranked scoring defense last week in the Browns. And Wirfs is expected to miss 3 to 4 weeks. They're still under 500 on the season. They rank towards the bottom of the league in rushing, red zone offense, and in explosive plays. Tom Brady, this stat was nuts. He had been 218-0 when he had a 7-point lead in the final minute of the fourth quarter. He'd never lost a game in that situation. And he did last week. They had to punt 9 times. It's the most times a Tom Brady team has punted since week 4 of 2019. They went 3 and out 6 times. They have not scored over 21 points in a game since week 4. It was a big day for Godwin. 12 catches, 110 yards. I mean, other than that, they did not do much. Offense failed to gain 100 yards rushing for the 9th time out of 11 games this year. Evans is in a big funk. He caught 2 of 9 targets, 31 yards, 7 games in a row where he has not scored a touchdown. That's the longest stretch of his career. But because the division is so bad, they are still leading the division, even though they have losses on the road this year to the Steelers, Panthers, and the Browns. The Saints, though, they only gained 260 yards last week. 2 big plays really cost them a chance, though, to get even or close in that game. We talked about a few of them. 2 turnovers in the red zone. They missed a field goal. I mean, right there, 3 on the field goal, 2 turnovers in the red zone that could have been touchdowns. That's 17 points possible. That it's not far-fetched to say they could have scored 17 in that game. They actually had more yards per play than the 49ers did last week. That was the longest stretch of games by a current active stretch of games by a team without being shut out. It was the first time since 2001 the Saints got shut out in a game last week. 332 games. Talk to us about Saints Bucks.
I liked the Saints +4. Tom Brady has struggled against the Saints. He's coming to the Bucks. He's 1-4 ATS. The lone cover was that game earlier this year when they should have just straight up lost it. Dennis Allen's defense has limited Brady to 245 yards passing a game. Brady has thrown an INT in every game but one. And in 2 of those games, the Bucks are only averaging 14.6 points per game. And in 2 of those games, they actually failed to score a touchdown. Flip side, like we mentioned, Saints were that 13-0 is a little bit deceiving. They did have some chance to score. Looking at Brady's time with the Bucks, he is not covering numbers as a short favorite. Went home as a 4-point favorite or more. 4-point favorite or less. 5-1 ATS, small sample size, but still that's only 16%. Bucks are at the middle of the road defending the run game this year. I think Kamara is going to be able to get it going on the road. Jarvis Landry is coming back. Why is it important? That forces the opposing team's number 1 DB to cover him and Chris Olave to get a better matchup. The Bucks are number 22 DVOA defending number 2 wide receivers. I think Olave is in line for a huge game. The Bucks, you mentioned it, really banged up. They lost their starting left tackle. You have an immobile quarterback in Tom Brady. I think the Saints are going to be able to get to Brady. I trust the Saints defense a lot more. I think the Saints win. I played them at +4. I would look to play them 2 on the money line. And also something else, if you think the Saints are going to win this game, right now they're 11-1 to win the South. You have to play them to play the South as well. I did that as well. I put a little bit on the Saints 11-1 to win the South.
Eric, so how do these sound? Lions money line, Saints +3.5, Colts +11. Do we go Giants and Bengals, or do you want to put the Titans in there?
I think we definitely have to put the Giants in there.
Giants, and you want to go Titans at +5.5 or Bengals at +2.5?
Let's go Titans.
So Lions, Saints, Colts, Giants, Titans. Like, I like the Bengals. I'm fine playing a little money line on them there. I'd like the 3 in that game a little bit more with the Chiefs.
Like, I've noticed something a little weird. Like, usually, like, numbers kind of settle, but with the World Cup going on, I'm noticing we're seeing some big moves on Saturday. We saw it the other week with the Falcons-Bears game where that dipped under that 3 and it dropped down. Maybe we'll see it in this game where you get some Chiefs money coming in, just because I've noticed some weird betting trends with the World Cup. It's like lines are a little late shifting with the public money coming in.
Eric, talk to us about what you have going on this week. You and I all have a Twitter space at 2:00 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Just a little 15-minute preview of the Thursday night game. We'll talk about a lot of the things that we talked about here, but we'll give a couple other prop plays on there too.
Yep, give a couple prop plays. Got to, give out some, college basketball, maybe some NBA stuff too. My podcast will come out on Friday, talking some NHL. My boys, I have a new guy coming on. I'm going to talk some NHL betting. I'm going to give some NFL bets out and talk some fantasy football. And then my live stream, Beho is going to be on the live stream this Tuesday.
Eric, buddy, thank you so much. As always, you and I will be talking college football with the college football preview show at BTV Bets. That'll play. I think we're going to record it Thursday night, and that'll play early Friday morning because there are a couple of games on Friday throughout the day that we're going to discuss. And what is that? 11 college football games this weekend, then the Army-Navy game next weekend, and then it's bowls, man. We're all the way through, basically.
Yeah, it's been sad to see football go. It's been a good season. Got Tulane at 40-1 to win the American, still alive. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully cashing that ticket this weekend. And just
you and I've
keep it going.
Already been planning and setting up the transition from football into some of the other sports. So once college football is done and once NFL is done, there's still plenty of time with NFL, but once there's not as many games weekly on Better Than Vegas, we're going to have college football shows weekly, and we'll also have NBA shows weekly. Those will both probably start Christmas and then on right around like the new year, and we'll be able to start picking those up weekly because that's when the NFL season will be kind of shifting right to the playoffs. So we're already thinking ahead, man. It's already getting ready to make that transition in a little bit, but let's close out strong with some college football and some NFL. Good luck the rest of your week, buddy.
You too, my man. Talk soon.
Okay, that's Eric there over at ETOF21 Sports. Make sure to check out all of the great work he has, and you hear him here each and every week. Don't go anywhere, folks. Still a lot more to come on this episode of That's What G Said. Big thanks if you were just watching on social media and following along, and I'll try to post these on social